Welcome to the Gay Buddhist Forum, where teachers from all schools of Buddhism offer their perspectives on the Dharma and its application in modern times, especially for LGBTQI audiences. These talks are offered freely to the world and made possible by appreciative listeners. If you would like to support our efforts to share the Dharma with underserved audiences, please visit gaybuddhist.org. There you can donate, find a list of upcoming speakers, or enjoy many hundreds of these recorded talks dating back to 1996.
It's the custom of our group to just go around and say our names. And Stefan's new. If there's anybody else that came in late who's new or returning after long absence, let us know your name. My name is Grisha.
I'm Tom.
I'm Juan.
I'm Joe.
I'm Shantanu.
My name is Michael.
I'm Jim.
Jonathan.
My name is Cass.
My name is Mark. My name is Harley.
I'm Jerry.
Stephen.
My name is Clint.
My name is Ray.
My name is Matthew.
I'm Jeff.
Dennis.
My name is David.
Tony.
I'm Brad.
My name is David.
Peter.
My name is Paul.
David.
I'm Juan.
I'm Richard. I'm Jim.
Gary.
Joanne.
Welcome, everyone. So, today's teacher, Daigan Gaither, began Buddhist practice in 1995 in the Vipassana tradition, and then began to study Zen in 2003 with Bruein, Paula Roshi. He received lay ordination in 2006 when he was given the name Daigan, or Great Vow. He received priest ordination in July 2011. His work, practice, and free time include many hours devoted to community service in a variety of ways, including his work as one of the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence and as a volunteer at Zen Hospice Project. He has spoken nationwide on a variety of issues and has sat on a number of boards and committees that serve community and social justice. So welcome, Daigan. And I'll give you a 5-minute moment.
Okay. I actually really appreciate the clock. You'd be surprised at the number of places you go to speak and I don't actually wear a watch, and so being able to track time is really useful. I want to start by apologizing. I was supposed to give this talk several weeks ago and woke up from a nap on Friday afternoon and couldn't move and spent about 4 days with my first ever back problem, which is really interesting. But so I'm going to give the same talk. I was asked actually to speak about my thesis. I just finished a graduate program at the Graduate Theological Union where I got an MA in Buddhist Studies, a Master's of Divinity at the same time, and a few certificates, because why not overdo it? And so I'm going to talk a little bit about my thesis today, which was what I was asked to talk about. And the title of my thesis is actually Healing in Oppression, Contributions from Buddhist Teachings and Communities, which is a really fancy way of talking about Buddhist theology and what is sort of, to me, a central piece of Buddhist practice, which is healing. And so in this endeavor to sort of understand what does it mean to practice, and I have to say this is also a dense academic, which also means pretty boring, piece of work. It's about 112 pages. And so I'm going to just sort of try and rush through it with enough time for us to have a meaningful dialogue with your contributions as well. But really, so it's looking at healing, and specifically healing within oppression. As a queer guy who grew up and from the age of about 16 recognized that I was white, and that carried a certain dishonesty in what I was raised in a conservative family. And so at about 16, I discovered, oh my God, like I don't understand history. I don't understand a bunch of stuff that other people did. And so it sort of set in motion a bunch of things. And so I've spent a lot of time looking at oppression. And then looking at specifically, how is it that I, as a queer guy who never really could live in the closet, I've always been sort of, my mother likes to call it fancy. Sometimes fancier than others. So, you know, and who's experienced a great amount of oppression, and then starting to recognize in my 20s that I was actually contributing to oppression of others. As a man, as a white guy, when I came out, when I started to sort of participate in queer culture outside of parks, most of the people surrounding me were lesbian separatists. And so a great deal of my politic and my understanding of queerness actually comes from this feminist, womanist perspective. And so as a budding little queer activist, I started to recognize that social justice was not just about AIDS and queerness, and it wasn't what I thought it was. So all of that is sort of the introduction to this topic. And most of the bulk of the work is focused on the ideas around healing. So I get into, my understanding of oppression is that oppression is actually a system and a practice. We practice oppression. And oppression is practiced on us. It's not an event. Because it operates within a system, if we understand it as a practice, then we can also understand our own healing as a practice. How is it that I practice healing in the world? And most of my work around healing relies on a woman's, the work of a woman named Paula Arai, who is a Buddhist scholar who wrote a really wonderful book called Bringing Zen Home, and in which she talks about Buddhist laywomen and their sort of ritual life. And she lays out this idea of healing as a 10-principled thing. What I'm going to focus on is her first principle of healing is experiencing interrelatedness. And so I go into a great deal about what it means first to practice the experiencing part, and also what do we mean when we say interrelatedness or interdependence, and how do we understand those as ideas? So first I want to talk about the experiencing, and I think that it's really important that we understand that Buddhism at its core is an embodied practice, and it's a practice that is not really about what I can read or study or listen to. It's not something that somebody else can give to me. It's something that I only experience through my own experience. In Zen, we like to say the world worlds the world. My teacher likes to say, experience the experience you're experiencing. So this idea that at its core, what we do when we sit on the cushion and what we do when we try to live a life of vow and of intentionality is we're trying to get to an understanding of what it is that we are experiencing. What's it like to be me in this moment? And how is that different than what it's like to be me in the next moment? So if we start from this understanding of taking our place, which is another way of experiencing the experience that we're experiencing, I like to call it taking my place. When I can just be embodied in this place. One of the experiences that arises in those moments is interrelatedness or interdependence. One of the leading scholars who talks about that is a guy named Nagarjuna, or there's numerous ways to say his name. I like Nagarjuna. And he talks about it in what's called the Loka Sutra. He says, this is because that is. This is not because that is not. This ceases to be because that ceases to be. So there's two pieces to understand here. One is that everything arises because of everything else. This moment happens because of everything else that's happening in this moment around the world. The world worlds the world. But it's not just that we're connected. It's not just that we are in the mix of all of this stuff, but we're actually causing it. It's not just that this exists with that, but this exists because of that. So all things arise with and because of everything else. Does that sort of make sense? So, but how do we understand that in the context of anatta, which is no self? And this is the big question that Nagarjuna was really trying to dig at. And this is sort of the beginning, this was all happening at the beginning of what is known as the Mahayana or the Prajnaparamita sort of school of Buddhism arising. Now, we like to think that this was somehow a separate school and all the monks were living in this monastery and the more traditional monks were living in this monastery. But the truth is they were all practicing together. But these monks started to question and try to figure out, as through their own experience, what it was that we could figure. What does it mean to be the cause of something and have no self? And so Nagarjuna sort of proposes and built a structure on what are called the two truths. I'm currently working on a workshop on whiteness that I'm calling Two Truths and a Lie. So these two truths are that the conventional truth, this truth that I'm me and you're you, and I have these experiences and you have those experiences based on these bodies that we inhabit. These skandhas arise together and form this thing that I like to call me. At the same time that that's happening is this ultimate truth. The ultimate truth is that none of that is substantial. None of that is abiding and has its own being. That when we can peer beyond this conventional truth, we get to some understanding of when all of that kind of fades away. Now, in modern Western Buddhism, a lot of times we like to, as human beings, I think, we like to categorize things. And so we take on we hear about the ultimate truth and we think, oh, that's the goal. That's some kind of nirvanic or liberative experience. And so we focus on this ultimate truth, where I stop being a queer guy, I stop being a guy, and I try to pretend that none of that stuff is here, or that it has any meaning or impact in the way that I operate in the world. But that sort of falls apart when you begin to sit down and you look at, wait a minute though, I am a queer guy. I spend my time on retreat partially looking at boys' asses. It's a great distraction. When I'm tired of my own story, cute boys are really helpful. And Nagarjuna says, these things arise together and are supposed to be understood and practiced as simultaneous. Neither one is above or separate from the other. So to experience interdependence is to take refuge in our conventional reality of what it is to be me in the world, and how it is that that dissolves into you and us and this experience right now. To be me in the world and then sit down in a seat and move my mouth trying to allow you to speak. Conventional truth says, I'm giving a talk. Ultimate truth says, we're giving a talk. The entire world is giving a talk. There's a really wonderful Zen teacher named Earthlyn Manuel Zenju, and she wrote a book called The Way of Tenderness, Awakening Through Race, Sexuality, and Gender. Nagarjuna calls this misunderstanding of the two truths as grasping the snake incorrectly. That by elevating either the conventional, where we spend all of our time just focused on how we're different and separate and unique, or spending all of our time in this place of, oh, we're all one. I don't see race, I don't see gender, I'm not this thing called a man. That Nagarjuna calls that grasping the snake incorrectly. And Zenju talks about the snake in a really wonderful way. She says, we must acknowledge the relevancy of our lived experience, even within the absoluteness of our being, beyond our material embodiment. There is a rational self on the path of spirit. In other words, our identities in terms of race, sexuality, and gender cannot be ignored for the sake of some kind of imagined invisibility or to attain spiritual transcendence. We are not capable of being embodied selves with a capital S, nor are we meant to be. We cannot become the self with a capital S that we cannot touch, that does not suffer, that has no name, no color, no eyes, no ears, no nose, no tongue. No matter how many labels we drop, we cannot become this transcendent self. There's no way to live in that experience of no self, because we come with these bodies. Now, we can have moments where we can feel interdependent, where we can experience interdependence, but to live there is impossible. And I sort of say in my paper that the way that we experience that in the moment is by fully experiencing this moment in the conventional way. That it's only through the experience of absolutely what it is that I am and what it's like to be me can I experience moments of transcendence, of liberation. And so the practice of experiencing interdependence is actually the practice of experiencing ourselves. So my advisor on my thesis committee is a teacher named Daigaku Kinst. She's a Zen Buddhist teacher and a psychotherapist, and she runs a group down in Santa Cruz. But because she's on my committee, I had to read her book. And she wrote a book called Trust, Realization, and the Self. And in this book, she uses a metaphor and she uses it throughout the book to understand this. And the metaphor is of the tapestry. And so if we look, we have these tapestries. And if we look at them, we see one thing. There's a picture of Kuan Yin with the Buddha, and I'm imagining Manjushri. Here is a beautiful tapestry of leaves and nature. That tapestry is made up of threads. Now, we can take out a thread, and if we see ourselves as individuals, as the thread, those threads come and go, and threads break, and all of those things. But in order to see the beauty of the tapestry, those threads have to be there. We experience the beauty of the whole by those threads being the threads. By us being ourselves, this beautiful picture of the world can emerge. So that's a quick way of sort of talking about things in regards to this experiencing interrelatedness. And then how do we use that? How do we understand that? And how do we make community? Because the other thing I point out is that community is also a practice. It's a system. There's the systems of oppression, there's the systems of healing, and there's the system of community. And if we start to think of community as a verb, how is it that we can how does that become the experience of healing? And so I look at a couple of Buddhist communities and talk about how it is that they are operating together to sort of provide space for individuals to experience their own place, to take their place, and also participate in the totality of the experience. I was listening to William Barber yesterday, and one of the things he was speaking about, those of you who don't know, he's the African-American preacher who spoke at the Democratic National Convention, and he's doing a thing right now around Charlottesville, but also he's calling it the Poor People's Project, and he's looking at the ways in which poverty contribute to the disunity that's happening in the world right now. The ways in which the lie of poverty has separated us and prevented us from working together to sort of answer these systems of oppression. And so he was talking about was that if we can start to do the work in our own lives, that if we can start to recognize how it is that I believed something that wasn't true, and how do I get the information to unpack that? That when we sit down and we study what it is that it means to be us, What do I believe just because somebody told me that? And then to take that and see, are there other ways that I've experienced the world that maybe I haven't paid attention to because I was busy believing this lie that I thought I've been told? So as I unpack my own experience of being a man, of being queer, to really look at what did I learn about those things that maybe aren't true. As I started to sort of unpack my own shame around being queer and my own sexuality and my own sexual expression and the ways in which I operate in the world, I got told a lot of stuff. A lot of that wasn't true. I got told a lot of stuff. I grew up in the South in a really conservative family, and I got told a lot of stuff around what it meant to be white. I got told a history of racism and white supremacy that protected certain beliefs and understandings. I had to begin to sort of look at, is this true? The hardest part of all of that, the hardest part for me continues to be what I call non-opposition, which is I want to be able to sit down and look at these parts of myself and not push them away, not push the world away. Believe you when you tell me something about your experience. Believe myself when I hear, maybe that's not so true. Maybe I'm not entitled to that. Maybe I really did talk over that woman in that meeting. Maybe I really wasn't too busy to help that person cross the street who couldn't see. Can I sit with that without opposition, without adding anything to the story, which includes not wallowing in shame and guilt, but really just sort of acknowledging, oh yeah, this is my experience of the world. And then to take my vow and to say, can I do it differently next time? Because here's the thing about oppression. It's not just the oppressed who suffer. It's not just the homophobes who suffer when we are busy oppressing queer people, when we're not letting transgender people serve in the ways that they want to serve, when we're not acknowledging people's humanity. It's not just those people who are suffering because of this ultimate thing, the fact that there's no separation. So ultimately, every act in which I'm complicit in oppressing someone else is in fact oppressing myself. We know this to be true. Because every moment that I can experience myself fully and then go beyond that and experience this interdependent and interrelatedness, what I see, what is there is this connectedness, this lack of separation. Bell Hooks likes to call it to love blackness. It's not enough to just be anti-racist. So I've spent the last couple of years really looking at what it is that I love. What it is that I'm bringing to the world. What do I uplift? What is it that I'm encouraging? This soup that makes up all of us, what do I add to it? And is that really who I want to be in the world? Is that really what I want to add to the world? So to heal within oppression is to take our place and then decide what's an appropriate response. And can I do that without opposition? Without adding anything that's not skillful? Now, the interesting thing about my paper is that it uses a lot more big words to talk about those things. I was rereading it as I was preparing for the talk, and I just thought, oh my God, it's really heady. Which is funny because I had to think about how is it that I can come here and talk about how to take all of these concepts and then actually make them mean something. Because at the end of the day, words on a page don't really translate to activity in my own world. I'm happy to share my thesis with anybody. I'll give you my card when I leave, and when we leave, and you can read it and be bored. But really, I want to encourage you to practice these ideas and to look at how it is that you're healing in your own life. What is your practice of healing? If we stop making healing an event, if we begin to see Buddhism not as just meditation, but as healing, and Buddhist practice as something other than I go to this place on Sundays and I sit down and we meditate for 30 minutes and then I hear somebody talk and then I go out and I live my life and that's somehow separate. But we really look at how do I practice healing in my world? What's it like to be me? And do I like what that is? Because at the end of the day, that's all you've got. I want to wish you all well. And I want to dedicate the merit of our time together today to a young man who died of a drug overdose. I got a call this morning from his mother. And so that's what happens when we can't practice healing. And luckily his mother has a practice of healing. Her heart is broken, but you know, broken hearts aren't the worst thing in the world. So thank you all very much, and I welcome your questions, comments, additions, subtractions, multiplications. Hi, Thomas, right?
Daigan. Thank you so much. You started off talking about oppression as a system.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you know, I have in my own mind understanding, interpretation, or opinions about what oppression is and everything, but I don't want to assume that that's your understanding or anyone else's. And so, you know, is it more than just, I want to hear what you have to say, but is it more than just, you know, the misinterpretations of existing history books or the laws that are ensconced, you know, in the land that sort of make this possible and persistent? You know, how would you talk about it as a system?
Well, I think that it's all of those things. But it's also, how is it that I would, like, the oppression of queer people? How is it that I understood for a very long time that what I was doing was wrong? You know, I'm now in a place in my life where I actually celebrate my uniqueness. I have no interest in assimilating into quote-unquote mainstream culture. I like being a faggot, but it took me a long time to get there. So it's not just the systems of governments, and it's not just the systems of history and who's telling the stories, but it's also the system of what I tell myself, what we tell each other, how we treat each other, what we allow and encourage, and what we bring to the world. That's part of the system. So if we think of the system as not something separate from our own lives and how we're living, you know, and our own lives are made up of all of these things, you know, how we're relating to the government and the laws and the police and the this and the that, how we're relating to each other, how we get served. How do we check out of the grocery store? There's a system in place that orchestrates that. And then how do I participate in that? You know, one of the great things about being a Buddhist teacher and a Buddhist priest is that I live in a certain way reliant on the generosity of other people. And so I've had to change my system of relating to the world in such a way that I begin to be grateful for all of these really strange things. Like the guy who came to my house yesterday to move my TV. And we were chatting and we were talking about what it was like to be him. And one of the things that was really interesting was people pay him to come and do work for them in their houses and treat him like shit. And I thought, what a really fascinating thing. Here this guy, yes, I'm paying him, but you know, that's a lot of work and I can't do it. I was really grateful that I had the resources to do that, to pay him, and that he could do this thing for me that I couldn't do myself. That's all I could think about was, I'm so glad you're here. And yet, that's not how everybody... So there's a system in place that says, I'm entitled to his service because I paid him a certain amount of money, and therefore he's going to do it the way I, you know, and just sort of blah, blah, you know. And that's a much different system. So it's all these big things, but it's also all these little things. And it's also how it is that I treat myself at the end of the day. I participate in it by telling myself stories about who I think I am. So it's all of it. Like we want to, again, human nature is to categorize things and sort of put things in boxes so that we can understand them. But if we just sort of go, no, the system is everywhere and everything. Just like the system of healing is everywhere and everything. And the system of community is everywhere and everything. You know, if I walk into a room and I just decide I'm going to make community here, that's a much different approach to being in space with other people. Especially for me as an introvert. Then if I go into a place and, I'm this guy, you know, and sort of rely on something other than the normal systems of engagement. So try not to categorize, but really look at, what if it's all a system? And then how do I want to participate in that?
Is not having that view that it's everywhere and persistent in all of us. Is that why it's so hard for us to? I mean, we can spot oppression, but we're like, I don't do that.
Right.
Or the same reason why it's hard for someone to hear that they're a racist. or to, you know, to come to that understanding. I mean, they're like, oh yeah, racism is bad, but that's not me. I mean,
Right.
it's the same.
Well, we all want to be good. I want to be a good white guy. I really do. Like, I want a cookie and a gold star. You know? And not just around race stuff, but I want it in everything. My first meeting with my teacher, I said to him, I want an A in Zen. I told the story numerous times. His response was, let's start with an F and see how you do. Hence, he's my teacher. But because we categorize these things, right? We want to be one of the good ones. And then when that's challenged, when our own ideas about being a good one gets challenged, or the lie that we've been told about what it means to be a good one gets challenged, Dr. Barber yesterday was, one of the greatest things he ever said was, he was talking about being in a place where he was being oppressed, and he was talking about with an older African American man, and the African American, this elder to him said, they're just believing the lie. What we do to defend our own stories is amazing. And that's why it's so important to take our place and really be in our place without the story, without adding to it. If I can not bring the story into that place and just stay curious about, well, what's it like to be me now? What's it like to hear that? One of my friends the other day, I said something really rude to her, and you know, she just sort of said, you're an asshole. And I was like, well, no, I meant this. And she's like, yeah, but you're still an asshole. And I was, instead of sort of saying that, I just kind of had to back up and go, well, what's it like to be called an asshole? Huh. And what am I defending when I just get all, who do I think I am? Most of the time I'm just a doofus running around trying to do my best. Okay. Hi.
Hi.
Tell me your name.
David.
Hi, David.
Thank you.
That's my dad's name.
This is about mending this here. I want to just share my gratitude for your talk. Really, I had moments of almost tears because things you said really resonated with what I experienced, and that sitting with yourself is an access point for connecting with interconnectedness. Really resonated with me deeply, and I appreciate you calling out and owning, and I share that with you of owning the experience of benefiting from racism and benefiting from as a white man. And it's been a lot of work I've been doing myself and with my employees and people I work with and working on cultural humility. So thank you for naming that here. And the couple of things that struck me is that I didn't hear you say, and I'm curious, a little bit curious why when you talk about oppression, I don't hear you use the word power, because I think that's part of it falls close to who has the power is what defines oppression in a lot of ways. So it's an inquiry, it's almost like an academic question why I didn't use that word. And then when you talk about healing from oppression or healing, the word trauma didn't come up either. And I think that's a really big part because that's kind of the result of experiencing oppression. And just it's kind of like a little more intellectual, I guess, inquiry about why those words didn't come up in your today.
I can tell you. I think, particularly as a white guy, I use power as an excuse. And it's just part of the story. So I don't talk about it in terms of power because that's not really the access point for me. The access point for me is, what am I protecting? Who do I think I am? What's it like to be me? And the first layer of that might be power, but then it's also fear and I'm not going to get what I want, and they're going to take something away from me. You know, you listen to the marchers in Charlottesville, and you hear them say things like, "We're not going to be replaced." That's not about power. That's about fear. So I don't talk about power because for a long time, white people and men in particular have used it as an excuse to just sort of work on the surface. And I don't talk about trauma because I think in large groups where there are people that I don't know, I talk about trauma when I do workshops and things. I don't talk about it in environments like this, mostly because people who are traumatized can be, who haven't necessarily healed or practiced healing around that particular trauma, that can be really difficult for them. And so I tend to avoid things that, like I have to speak in a general way here, that I would treat differently if we spent an entire weekend working together and or a longer time. Like my students and I talk about trauma all the time. Yes, we are traumatized by oppression. You know, as a queer guy who's been beaten up, as a sissy who's been, you know, called a sissy my whole life, as a white guy who has friends who have been shot and killed and have to look at those images. I think about trauma a lot, but I tend to not. It's about taking, well, and understanding who. I don't know everybody here, so I can't. I have to be really mindful of what I bring into the room, because we're going to leave here, and people are going to have to deal with whatever it is I brought into the room.
Yeah.
I think we're out of time. We can talk more. I'll give you my card. You can call me or email me. And thank you very much.
Thanks very much. Announcements? You want to read it?
Hi. Every quarter or so I make this spiel to you all about the newsletter. GBS produces a newsletter which is sent this time to 334 people, paper copies, as opposed to the which is online on our website. 277 of those go to prisoners, and I mention that usually. It is an outreach that I don't think we have, or we may not have a lot of direct connection to. Occasionally we get letters from some of those guys, and Tom passed one on to me from this spring, and I thought I'd read a little bit of it to get let you have an idea of who's at the other end of what we send out here and what kind of effect it has. And then I'm going to follow it up with a request for volunteers to help put it all together. We stamp, label, fold, staple, all this stuff. So this is from Tom, who's in Avenel, New Jersey. I've heard of this prison somewhere, but he's in New Jersey. That's bad enough. Anyway, apologies to New Jersey, I suppose. Dear GBF, I've been meaning to write for a while to thank you for your newsletter. I have thoroughly enjoyed the lessons of Tom Moon, David Lewis, Benjamin Young, and others. The spring 2017 letter, Inside Out, actually motivated me to write to you. It made me realize how fortunate I am to be where I am incarcerated and how well our chaplain has been helping us to start a prison sangha here. As with many people who come searching for a spiritual path, I was at an all-time low and I was looking for a way out of suffering. And as most of us have found out, the Buddha offered a very simple treatment plan through the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. Before starting the practice, I dreaded waking up and facing another day in jail, locked up for the crime I am here for. There was a lot of shame, guilt, and low self-esteem. Today, I can't wait to wake up an hour before the lights come on, sit in meditation, and then when the lights come on, do my daily Dharma reading. Then I feel confident and compassionate to go out in the world here and really open up to people and connect in real relationships, not having to wear masks, not needing to become or to get rid of. It has been truly liberating. So to all the volunteers at GBF and throughout the world who are working with prisoners to bring them the Buddha's message, thank you, thank you, thank you. You all are, as Maya Angelou's quote in David Lewis's article states, a rainbow in our clouds. When we thought our journey had reached a dead end, you have shown us a new path, an endless path, with many lessons to be learned and realized. Thank you and bless you all. Peace and metta, with a bow, Tom.
Wonderful.
Speaks for itself. So who can help? I need probably 8 or 10 guys after we start.
Okay.
Sure. Thank you.
While you're on the topic, though, I want to put a plug in for the Prison Pen Pal project. And I know you guys are connected to that, but if you don't have a pen pal, you should have one. It's an amazing experience.
If anybody wants one, I can provide you.
I knew you were involved.
We sort of discontinued it because it seemed wrong to give false hope to these people and say, you're on the waiting list, even though they'll never rise to the top of the waiting list because the need is so great. And
Right.
But anyway, if you do want one.
We can just do the best we can.
Yeah.
I have a pen pal. If you have questions about how it works, I can help with that too. Speaking of tea, cookies.
Oh, that's how you know me, yes. Yes, stay and fortify yourself for the work ahead. There is tea and cookies. And enjoy the fellowship of the Sangha. If you have tea, just put your cup in the sink and I'll take care of it. Let's see, at 12:30, I'll be coming around with the dawn bowl. So please feel free to be as generous as you possibly can. At 12:30, some people gather at the front door. Today they'll gather maybe a little later to go to lunch. And everybody's welcome to do that. There's a sign-up sheet on the credenza if you'd like to be added to our sources of information.
Two quick reminders. 2 weeks ago, our speaker, Sister Mary, was here and was talking about Richard Wright with his new book. He's going to be speaking at CIIS, I think, a week from Thursday for $10. And that might be something you want to hear, as well as Terry Grossa on Fresh Air on NPR did an interview with him. You can get listen to the free podcast. It's really, really good to hear. And the second reminder, Daddy Nicoletta, who came to town in the early 70s, and he worked at the Harvey Milk Camera Store, and he was portrayed in the movie Milk, if you saw that. And he's been a long-time chronicler in San Francisco. And also, he was the main man to make sure that the statue of Harvey Milk is in City Hall. Anyway, he came out with a big book. You might have seen some of the publicity around. He's going to be at Dog-Eared Books this afternoon at 2 o'clock, probably making a little presentation and signing books. So after folding newsletters, if you want to mosey over, it should be an interesting couple hours.
Yeah, I just want to remind everyone, the annual GBS annual retreat, October 27th and 29th, is now accepting reservations, and our Dharma teacher, Steve Turney, is speaking here next week if you want to get a preview of what he's all about.
And then, so you mentioned a couple weeks ago, Sister Mary Peter had a great talk that she gave to us. And that was sort of a springboard for what we're going to be doing October 1st. Will be an all Sangha discussion instead of small groups. We'll all meet to discuss if we collectively think that perhaps GBF might play a wider role in society, and other than just coming and sitting here and with each other. So, it's just a discussion to sort of poll us and see what thoughts we might have.
I'm sorry, that's just a week from today?
October 1st.
Oh, October.
A month from
2 weeks from today.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, October 1st.
Oh, sorry.
Not so
Okay. And then, so next week the speaker is Steve Tierney, professor of community mental health and chair of the Master's in Counseling Psychology core curriculum at CIIS. He is a licensed psychotherapist in California and is nationally certified counselor. Stephen is an ordained Buddhist priest and is the co-founder and chief education officer of the San Francisco Mindfulness Foundation. SF Mindfulness Foundation provides mindfulness-based relapse prevention and addiction services provider training. Dr. Tierney lectures and leads workshops and retreat nationally and has taught at a number of universities, including current assignments at the University of San Francisco, JFK University, and the American College of Traditional Chinese Medicine. Stephen's areas of interest include Buddhist psychology and mindfulness-based therapies for addiction, recovery, and resiliency services. So he'll be our teacher here and at the retreat.
He's an awesome guy. A really good friend of mine.
And then for new folks, Donna is a polyword, and it's, I guess the teachings that we hear are given away freely because they're considered priceless. They're unattached and they're unconditional generosity. So we ask for your unconditional generosity by donating to the expenses that pay for the rent for this room, honorariums for our speaker, the work we do with homeless youth, and all the things that make the Sangha tick and talk. So the suggested donation is $10. And so let's gather for our dedication in there. We have a double dedication in there. So one goes to
By the power and truth of this practice, may all beings have happiness and the causes of happiness. May all be free from sorrow and the causes of sorrow. May all never be separated from the sacred happiness which is without sorrow. And may all live in equanimity, without too much attachment or too much aversion, believing in the equality of all that lives.
Thank you for listening to the Gay Buddhist Forum. If you would like to hear several new talks per month and be notified of upcoming speakers so you can participate live, please subscribe to this podcast, like us on Facebook, and join our mailing list by visiting gaybuddhist.org.